Hey everyone, my name's Dom, welcome to the channel. As we're nearing the end of the year, I thought it would be a good time now to do a series update where I take a look at every single series that I've interacted with in 2021. So let's go and dive in. So I've previously done series videos where I've looked at every series that I'm in the middle of and also every series that I want to be in the middle of. This one's slightly different because it's going to take a look at all of those series that I have touched in 2021, whether it's a series I've made progress on or a series I've made a decision on. Part of my reasoning for this was to do a bit of pruning with regard to the number of ongoing series that I've currently got, because a number of those I haven't touched in a long time and I just cannot see when I'm next going to get to these. So it's time to make a decision on some, and obviously to incorporate all of the titles that I started, finished or continued with in 2021. So I've set myself up something a little bit akin to a tier list where I will go through all of these series and place them into one of 5 categories. So the first of these is the soft DNF, which are series that I am not actively continuing with, whether this is through my fault because I just don't know when I'm going to get round to them, or the author's fault because I don't know when there's going to be a new book released. These are titles that I am definitely open to continuing with at some point, but they are not a priority at the moment. Then we've got the hard DNF. These are series that I am done with. I'm not bothering with any further. I've read as much as I want to and I am ditching these series. Ongoing is the category for series that I am still in the middle of, and there are still books that have been released that I haven't yet got to. Then we have the up-to-date, which is the ongoing series where there are no further books at the moment, so I will continue with these whenever the next book comes out. And then finally, series that are finished, which are naturally the series that I've finished in 2021. So there are 38 series that I've interacted with to some degree in 2021. I'll go through these in rough chronological order. So the first batch will be all of the titles that I have not touched in 2021, so these are just ones where I've made a decision over which category to place them in. After that, we'll get to the books that I have actually done some reading with in 2021, and those will be done chronologically from the first book that I touched this year. So let's just start at the start and take a look at the series that I haven't read any of in 2021. So with these ones going alphabetically, we start off with the Coppercat series by Jen Williams. So I read The Copper Promise book 1, and the next book that I have got in this series is Iron Ghost. I don't know when I'm going to get to this series. It is one that I do want to continue at some point, so it's not a hard DNF, but I'm going to put this one in the soft DNF category so I can kind of forget about it until I get to the point where I actively want to carry on with the series. Following up from that, we have the Dagger and the Coin series by Daniel Abraham. I've read The Dragon's Path, and the next book on this list is King's Blood, and this is another series, there'll be a few of these to start with, that I am adding to the soft DNF category. Third up, we've got The Demon Cycle by Peter V. Brett. I'm going to put this one straight in soft DNF as well. I've only got one book left, which is The Core, but I just do not know when I'm going to get around to reading this. I kind of want to read it because it's the last book in a series and it will allow me to finish this one off and just mark it as complete. But I've just got no priority to it. I've got no motivation to read in this final book at the moment, partly because it's been so long since I read the last one. So for the moment at least, this is another one for the soft DNF category. Now at this point, quite a few of the titles are going into this soft DNF category early on, and that's because we're looking at the titles that I've not touched for at least a year. I've not touched these in 2021, and there's a reason for that, so most of these will probably land in that particular category. The next one which we'll do is The Dwarves by Marcus Heights. Again, this is a 5-book series where I've read 4 and I haven't read the 5th book, which is The Triumph of the Dwarves. Again, quite a big book, and I'm not sure when I'm going to get to it because I have so many other priorities that I want to hit first. So soft DNF for Marcus Heights. Okay, moving on, and the next one on the list is The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. So the next book that I've got in this series is Caliban's War. I read Leviathan Wakes a couple of years ago, haven't got round to it, but this is a series that I do want to continue. So I'm moving this one into my ongoing series list. I've added The Expanse as one of my series that I want to make progress on in 2022, so I'm going to put a bit of priority to this. I don't know how many books I will cover in this 9-book series, and I guess that depends on how I get on with it and what else comes along, but Caliban's War, at least book 2 in the series, I definitely aim to be reading in 2022. Next on the list we have A Gentleman Bastards by Scott Lynch. This is one that goes into the soft DNF category, so I can forget about it until the Thorn of Emberlane, the next book that I have to read, comes out. So this is one that I am up to date with the series, but because we don't know how long it's going to be until the Thorn of Emberlane is released, I'm just going to put it to the side for the moment. I'm not going to count it as a series that I'm in the middle of until it becomes an ongoing series once more. Next up we have another one for the soft DNF category, and that is Green Rider by Kristen Britton. Another series that I haven't touched in a good number of years now. So the next one on my list is Black Veil, which I think is book 4 in this series, and at some point maybe I will get back to it, but there's no priority for me to do so in 2022. Like The Gentleman Bastards, this next one goes into the soft DNF category because we're waiting for the next book to come out. This is the Kingkeller Chronicle. I'm up to date with this series by Patrick Rothfuss, and whenever it comes out, I'll make a decision then. I'm still not sure whether I am really eager to be reading Doors of Stone when it comes out, or if I'll just let it slide by. I guess we'll wait and see when it does come out, if it does, and what I'm reading at the time and what my particular priorities are at that point. Next we have another title by Marcus Heights. This is the sequel series, I guess, to the Dwarves. This one titled The Legends of the Elfar, and the next book that I've got to read in this series is book 2, Devastating Hate. This one again goes into the soft DNF at the moment because it's just not a priority for me right now, but I do have the next 2 books in this series on my physical bookshelf, but I just don't see a point in the immediate future when I'm going to be getting to reading them. Next up on my list, I have Lucan Drakenfeld by Mark Charan Newton. So this is only a 2-book series. Book 1 is just titled Drakenfeld, which I read something like 7 or 8 years ago, and I've not got round to Retribution, which is book 2 in this series. At this point, I just feel like that day is never going to come. I'm not going to get round to reading Retribution and finishing off this series. So this one I'm going to move into the DNF category and say goodbye to Lucan Drakenfeld. Neverwinter by R.A. Salvatore, part of the Forgotten Realms, part of the kind of ongoing saga of Drizzt Do'Urden. This one for me goes into the soft DNF pile. There are 3 more books in the series. The next one I have on my list is titled Neverwinter, like the series itself is, and again, it's been a few years since I read Gauntled Grim, which is the first book in this series, and I just don't know when I'm going to get around to Neverwinter. So for the moment, soft DNF, I do want to read this series at some point, but I just don't know when it's going to be. Another one that I do want to read at some point, and again I think this is a 4-book series, the Razor Chronicles by Michael J. Sullivan. I feel maybe a little bit bad calling this a series that I'm in the middle of because I didn't actually get that far through the first book, The Crown Tower, in this series. I just couldn't get into it at the time for whatever reason. I'm hoping it's me and not the book, because I do like Michael J. Sullivan's writing in general, and I love the characters involved here, Royce and Hadrian. They are 2 of my favourites, but this particular adventure just didn't work for me at the time I was reading it, so this one for now goes into the soft DNF pile. Next up we have A Song of Ice and Fire, another series that I'm up to date with but goes into the soft DNF pile because we do not know when Winds of Winter is going to be released. This is one that I will look forward to reading whenever it does come out, because I do like the Song of Ice and Fire series, and I want to know what happens, or what was originally intended to happen, as opposed to what we all saw happen in the Game of Thrones TV show. So soft DNF for now. Hopefully at one point this one, like the Gentleman Bastards, will get opened up and will be moved into my up-to-date or ongoing categories. The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. This is one that I've mentioned so many times as a series that I want to continue with, and I've done so again recently in my reading plans for 2022 video. So this one goes into the ongoing category because I do want to make progress with this in 2022. Words of Radiance is next, and I promise that I will get to this. I know it's difficult for me to do so, but I do promise to get to Words of Radiance at some point in 2022. Okay, so moving on, and this is the last of the series that I haven't touched at all in the last 12 months. This is Tyrus Rex Contracts and Terminations, one of the Galaxy's Edge series of books, which is a military sci-fi series that I enjoyed when I was in a phase where I was a little bit burnt out from fantasy and I was starting to delve into sci-fi to get me out of a reading slump. So I quite enjoyed this. I've got one book left to read, which is Madame Guillotine. I found these to be quite quick reads as well, so I think this particular book is maybe 400, 450 pages, but hopefully will be a comparatively quick read. So I'm moving this to the ongoing category to try and tie up this series in 2022. So then we get into the titles that I have touched. I have read at least one book, or part of a book in one case maybe, in 2021. So here we start off with the Sword of Shinara, or the original Shinara series. I read in January I think I read the last two books, the Elfstones and the Wish Song of Shinara, and I finished off this series in January. It took me a long time to do so. I tried to read the book that's actually titled The Sword of Shinara on 3 separate occasions. DNF'd that one, so I feel maybe a little bit of a cheat calling this a finished series, but I have completed the rest of it, and I'm just not going to try again with The Sword of Shinara because it just will not work for me. Following on from that series, I moved straight on to the Heritage of Shinara in February, and this one moves straight now into my soft DNF category. The second book in the series is the Druid of Shinara, and it focuses on a character that I didn't really like that much in the first book, the Scions of Shinara, so I immediately lost my motivation to be reading this title. At some point I do want to continue with Shinara and see how far I get through that series. I've heard there are some good things to be reading about in the later series in this expansive kind of collection of series, so I do want to continue with the overall Shinara series, but for the moment the Heritage of Shinara goes into the soft DNF pile. Then in March 2021, I finally finished the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. So this is another title which happily makes its way into the finished category. I read The Blade itself several years ago. I read Before They Are Hanged a couple of years ago, and I finally got round to Last Argument of Kings in 2021. So this is another one that's all neatly tied up now. Similarly, and also in March of 2021, I finished Of Blood and Bone by John Gwynne. I was reading John Gwynne's books when they originally came out, but then I hit my reading slump when this series was in the middle of being released. So I read A Time of Dread, and then it took me a couple of years maybe until I got to books 2 and 3, A Time of Blood and A Time of Courage. But this one is now also tied up and goes into the finished category. Immediately after reading those, in April 2021, I moved on to The Bloodsworn, reading a review copy of The Shadow of the Gods. This one is one which is going into my up-to-date category because there are at present no further books in this series, but Hunger of the Gods is next up. That one is scheduled to be released in April, and I will be reading that as soon as possible when it does come out. I had a good reading month in April, so there are lots of series that I did have a look at. The next one of these is Raven Shadow by Anthony Ryan. Blood Song was a really good book. Book 1 in this series I really liked. Tower Lord, however, I could not get into it. I also did this one on audiobook as I was testing out whether audiobooks would work for me, and I didn't manage to finish Tower Lord. I gave up about 50 or 60% through this book. So especially because I've heard that the third book in the series as well is a bit hit and miss. I've added this one to the DNF pile. I'm not bothered with The Raven Shadow, although I am interested in some of Anthony Ryan's other works, including the follow-up series in this same world and following some of the same characters. A series that I started in April is The Greatcoats by Sebastian de Castell, and this one I really liked, reading the second, third and fourth book in this series in June as part of a readathon. So this one goes into the finished pile, and I'm really happy to have completed this 4-book series because it was a really great time, and I definitely recommend picking this one up if you're looking for some good swashbuckling fantasy. The next series that I started, also in April, was not as good a time for me because this was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And this series I moved straight into the DNF pile because I was not interested whatsoever in continuing with The Poppy War. The next series that I tried out on audiobook was The Lightbringer by Brent Weeks. I read The Black Prism years ago, and I did try books 2 and 3, finished them both on audiobook in April, but I really grew disappointed with this series and decided to DNF it because by the end of book 3 I felt actually bored of listening to this series, and I decided that I wasn't interested, I didn't like where it was going, so this one moves into the DNF category. The final series that I looked at in April 2021 was The Divide by J.S. Dewis. So I read The Last Watch in April. The next book in the series is The Exiled Fleet, and although I had some definite issues with The Last Watch, I am intrigued. I did like the concept, I did like the most at least of the overall story, so at some point I do want to continue with the series and read The Exiled Fleet, but it's not a priority at the moment, so this one goes into the soft DNF category. Moving on to May, and I started the Black Tongue series with The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. This one I'm up to date with at the moment. I've not heard anything as to the second book in the series, but I do understand it to be a series, so this one goes into my up-to-date pile for now, and I will see what comes out as far as news goes for this particular series before making a further decision on it. Also in May I started my Robin Hobb journey with the Farseer. I read Assassin's Apprentice, started in May, finished in June, and then I haven't gone back to the series since. So this is another one that goes into my ongoing category because I do want to continue with this series, and I've made it one of my priority reads in my 2022 reading plan. So Royal Assassin, I'm going to hit this one in the next couple of months and look to get this series finished. I'm in ever so slightly better shape with the next series, Lacanius by James Islington, because this one I've read 2 books of. I started with The Shadow of What Was Lost in June, and I've now just got The Light of All That Falls left to read. So this one again is going to be one of my priority reads early in 2022, so I can move it over to the finished category, but for the moment it goes into the ongoing list. Another audiobook failure for me in June was Malazan Book of the Fallen. I tried twice previously to read Memories of Ice, and I gave it another go, and I read the whole thing, or listened to the whole thing I guess, on audiobook in June. But I decided at that point that I wasn't going to continue with the series because it's just not for me, it's not working, I'm not enjoying it, and I've got no motivation to continue reading with House of Chains being book 4 next on the list. So this is another series that goes into my DNF pile. In July I started a new journey with Zach Argyle reading Threadlight, and I've really loved this series. So this is one which goes straight into my up-to-date category because I'm just waiting now on book 3, Bonds of Chaos, being released in August 2022. So this one will be moved into my finished category as soon as I can get my hands on that book, but for the moment I am up to date. In August I tried out another book which there's only one of so far, but The Dark That Dwells is the start of a sci-fi space opera series that I enjoyed on the one hand but not so much on the other hand. This one because I'm not really eager to move on with the next book, and especially because that book I haven't heard any news of. I don't know when it's coming out or how far through the process it is yet. This one moves into my soft DNF pile because I will look to read it when it does come out, but I'm not sure how long I will wait before I do. September then saw me start the Kingkeller Chronicles by Jim Wilburn with the 7th Cadence. This is another one where there's only one book that's released so far, but I definitely enjoyed this one and I do want to continue and read the second book whenever it does come out. So this one, although again there's no news as yet as to when that will be, this one I'm moving into my up-to-date category because I will be looking to continue with this pretty much as soon as the second book becomes available. In October then I started the series of standalones, which is sometimes called The Great Leveller by Joe Abercrombie. So this is continuing the journey in the First Law world. I read Best Served Cold and I've got book 2 on the list, which is The Heroes. So this one I'm going to move into my ongoing category because I'm going to look to read The Heroes and Red Country and get this series finished off at some point in 2022. Another 2 series that I started in October, the first of those is The Reborn Empire by Devin Madsen. I read We Ride the Storm, and the next book on my list here is We Lie with Death. There's another book in the series and then a 4th book which comes out at the end of the year. It is scheduled for December 2022. So this one for now goes into my ongoing pile and I aim to move that to the up-to-date pile ready for book 4 to come out in December. The other series then that I started in October was the Kyradic Sagas by Alicia Wanstall-Burke. I'm going to cheat ever so slightly with this one and move it into my finished category because I am currently reading a review copy of the 3rd and final book in this series, Empire of Shadows. So by the time January comes along, I will have finished or be just about finished with this series. Then we move into November's reads and I started another series which has just one book so far to its name. That is the Illborn Saga by Daniel T. Jackson. So this one moves straight into the up-to-date category because it's another one that I will be eagerly continuing with when the second book in the series comes out. The same can be said for the next one, The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. So I've read the 2 books and the novella that are released in this series so far. Book 3 in the series of War and Ruin is going to be another one that I will read as soon as I can get my hands on it. So this series moves straight into the up-to-date category. And then the final series that I got to in 2021, in December I read Velocity Weapon, which is book 1 of The Protectorate by Megan O'Keefe. This is a sci-fi title that I was really looking forward to read, but I was a bit disappointed with by the time I got to it. So I may continue with the series at some point, but I don't know when it's going to be, and it's certainly behind quite a lot of other books and series in terms of my priorities, so this one moves straight over to the soft DNF category. Okay, so there we have 38 series that I've interacted with or made a decision on in 2021. So what do we have here? The soft DNF category. I'm quite pleased with this actually because it does get kind of out of my mind a number of series that I just do not know when I'm going to get to next. So I've got 15 titles of the 38, 15 titles that have been moved into the soft DNF. Full DNF that I'm not going to be looking at in the future unless some mad event happens. I've got 5 titles that have been finished off in that sense. Series that I've then actually finished, as in read all of the books of, I've got 5 in there as well. The ongoing series that I'm currently up to date with, there are 6 titles, and then I've got 7 in the ongoing series. So these are series that I'm looking to continue making progress with in 2022. Again, that's it for today. That is a look at all of the series that I have either made progress on or made a decision on in 2021. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of my choices. Do you think this was a good way of getting the information across to you? And is it something that you'd like to see similar videos of in the future? As always, like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I'll leave you here and hopefully see you again soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.